A woman like you never passes through an airport without carrying something dirty. The words struck the terminal like a gavel, not whispered, not hidden. They were projected with intent, designed to humiliate before a single bag was touched. Travelers froze in their steps. Families turned their heads. Phones lifted, red record lights blinking alive. The marble floor of O'Hare's Terminal B became a stage, and judgment had already been delivered. At the center stood Ava Sinclair, black, composed, dressed in a tailored gray suit that did not flaunt wealth but carried quiet authority. A slim laptop bag hung at her side. No jewelry, no designer flash. To strangers, she appeared ordinary. To the officer who had spoken, she was already guilty. "Step back. Possible narcotics," the officer barked. His voice carried the weight of accusation rather than protocol. His hand swung the cuffs like a pendulum. Another officer raised his palm and shoved the crowd backward, creating a crude circle of suspicion around Ava. The whispers began almost instantly. "She does not look first class. They always find something in bags like that." A young man whispered into his phone, "Streaming live from O'Hare, they are checking her for drugs." Ava did not flinch. Her gaze moved slowly, calmly, across badges, gloves, and eyes waiting for her downfall. Memory bled into the present. At 19, blocked from entering a bookstore because she fit a profile. At 28, denied a hotel suite because her credit card could not be real. And now, at 42, she stood in the middle of an airport terminal, partly built by her own company's investment, watching the same prejudice replay. She set her bag on the counter, not forceful, not timid, simply precise, letting the silence stretch until the air itself seemed to strain. Her voice followed, low but unshaken. "Be careful with what you plant. Roots have a way of growing back toward the hand that buried them." The officer frowned, his gloved fingers catching the zipper. Metal teeth parted, loud, deliberate, each click pulling the crowd deeper into anticipation. From the side, a young woman whispered, "I saw her name on the VIP manifest." She spoke softly, but a live stream microphone captured her words and pushed them into hundreds of feeds. Doubt flickered at the edges of the scene. Then Ava's phone lit in her hand. One word glowed on the screen, "Assistant." She did not answer. She let the glow sit between silence and revelation. The zipper froze halfway. The officer leaned closer, his face shifted, sharp with surprise. The crowd never saw what his eyes had found. They only saw his expression crack. That Ben. The lock on Ava's bag gave way. The zipper teeth parted one by one, tearing the silence into sharper fragments. The officer leaned in, his eyes caught by something inside. For a fraction of a second, his expression shifted. Shock, uncertainty. Then it hardened again, a mask pulled back into place. The crowd saw only hesitation. That single moment of pause sparked more tension than any discovery could. A woman in line whispered, "Why did his face change? What did he see?" Phones pushed closer, live streams carrying the hesitation to hundreds of screens in real time. Comments scrolled like waves. "Open it completely. She is innocent. This feels planted." The TSA supervisor snapped, his tone sharp enough to cut through the murmurs. "Check everything. Do not stop halfway." A second officer stepped forward and pulled a small plastic bag from the side pocket. Inside, fine white powder caught the fluorescent light. Gasps echoed. More phones tilted upward, desperate to capture the moment. Ava did not move. Her eyes followed every gesture as if watching a scene she had already memorized. From the waiting area, a young passenger suddenly stood. That was not from her bag. "I saw your hand in your jacket before you pulled it out." The supervisor's head whipped around. His voice boomed. "Sit down. This is lawful procedure." Ava's phone vibrated again. The screen glowed in her palm. The name Assistant shone at the top, but this time another line appeared beneath. "Protocol ready." Ava stared at the light, her expression unreadable, as if weighing whether the moment had finally arrived. Near the counter, a young airport intern clutched an iPad. She tried to step closer, her voice trembling. Her name. "I saw it." But before she could finish, the supervisor slammed his hand against the desk. "Enough. If she resists, write the report and take her into custody." The tension thickened. Ava placed her hand on the phone but did not press the call. The crowd seemed to hold its breath, waiting for her signal. She remained silent, steady, an anchor in the storm. The officer with the bag of powder lifted it high, his voice booming for all cameras to hear. Evidence is clear. But another passenger's phone captured something else. The subtle slip of his hand reaching into his jacket moments earlier. A second narrative existed, but it had not yet been spoken aloud. The young man in the hoodie still held his phone tightly, his thumb trembling above the screen. His live stream comments poured down in waves faster than he could read. Upload it now. Do not let them frame her. Save that woman. He could feel the weight of hundreds of unseen eyes pressing against him. One decision from his hand could shift the entire balance. The officer noticed. His voice cracked across the terminal. Turn that camera off. The command was sharp, but it carried desperation more than authority. Instead of compliance, more passengers raised their phones higher. The glow of screens multiplied until the terminal looked like a theater drenched in white light. The harder the officer tried to control the scene, the more control slipped away. The older man who had spoken earlier stepped forward again. His voice rose above the chaos. I saw it with my own eyes. He pulled it from his jacket, not her bag. Dozens of recordings caught the words. The officer's jaw tightened, but he could not silence every camera. His glare moved like a blade across the crowd, but resistance had already spread. Ava remained still, poised in silence. Her hand rested lightly on the glowing phone, assistant pulsing steadily on the screen. She had not pressed it. Her restraint became heavier than any outburst could be. Strangers wondered aloud, why is she waiting? Why is she so calm? Her composure became its own enigma, a force that unsettled the officers more than protest ever could. The intern clutched her iPad tighter. She stepped forward again, this time with urgency cutting through her fear. Her name is here, she whispered, louder than before. It does not belong on a passenger manifest. The supervisor intercepted her, palm firm against her shoulder. Back away. This is restricted. Cameras caught the confrontation. The lenses saw her eyes, wide with truth she could not release. The secret flickered on the screen in her arms, but it remained locked away. The officer with the plastic bag of powder raised it higher, his voice growing harsher. This is all the proof we need. His words clattered against the walls like loose stones. Some passengers nodded in belief. Others shook their heads, but the line between certainty and doubt had begun to blur. The young man in the hoodie pressed his lips close to the phone. If I upload this, everyone will know. His voice trembled, but the comment feed roared back encouragement. His thumb edged closer to the button. The crowd leaned toward him, as if pulled by gravity to the possibility of revelation. Then the radios crackled. A voice from Central Dispatch broke through the noise. Confirm positive ID on the suspect. Command wants details. The slip was small but heavy. Suspect, not passenger. The word carried a weight that turned heads. Why had Command already defined her as a suspect? Why was Central involved at all? The questions surged like fresh fuel on an already raging fire. Phones captured every syllable. Livestream chats exploded. Why do they call her a suspect already? This is planned. Something is off. Ava lifted her gaze slowly. She looked across the faces, the cameras, the officers. She did not speak. She did not resist. She only allowed the silence to tighten around her, a shield forged of composure. The terminal had transformed from a sterile checkpoint into a cauldron. Whispers clashed against shouts, phones buzzed with alerts, and every sound collided into a single storm. The young man in the hoodie could not hold back any longer. His thumb pressed down, and the video uploaded. Within moments, comments surged like a tidal wave. He planted it. Watch the jacket again. This whole thing is staged. Passengers replayed the clip on their screens, tilting phones toward strangers who leaned in with disbelief. The image was undeniable. The officer's hand slipped into his jacket before the powder appeared. The official story cracked. The officer's voice thundered. That evidence came from her bag. His words sounded hollow against the echo of replaying videos. Two versions of reality collided in the same hall. Trust fractured. The older man who had spoken earlier raised his hand once more. His voice cut through the crowd. Now everyone can see. You cannot bury this. Phones turned toward him. His testimony was no longer a lone statement. It was reinforced by proof looping endlessly on glowing screens. The chant began softly, a murmur of defiance. Check the footage. Check the footage. It grew louder, rolling through the terminal until it became a chorus. The crowd was no longer passive. It was alive, and it was turning. The TSA supervisor barked orders, desperate. Confiscate those devices. Secure the area now. But authority no longer carried weight. Every step toward control only fueled the resistance. The more he ordered, the more passengers pressed forward, their screens raised like shields of truth. The intern clutched her iPad to her chest, fear and resolve battling inside her. She took a step forward, voice shaking but louder than before. Her name is not in the passenger list. It is listed under clearance status. Gasps followed her words. The supervisor lunged, but phones caught the motion. The image of an officer silencing a young employee was streamed to countless feeds in real time. Ava still had not spoken. She remained a statue of restraint, her phone glowing with the word assistant. She had not pressed it. Her silence felt deliberate, a choice that unsettled even more than a scream could. What was she waiting for? The radios crackled again, voices sharp with urgency. Confirm containment. Do not let her activate anything. The words cut the air. Containment. Activate. The slip revealed too much. Phones captured every syllable, and the questions ignited instantly. Contain what? What is she about to activate? The crowd erupted in noise. Some demanded answers. Others shouted accusations. The officer slammed the bag of powder against the counter, his face flushed red. This is evidence. That is all that matters. But his voice drowned in the chant that had risen again, stronger. Check the footage. Check the footage. The terminal had become a storm. Chants of, check the footage, shook the walls. Phones were raised like torches, recording every twitch of every officer. The viral clip had already rewritten the narrative, and doubt spread like wildfire. In the center of it all, Ava Sinclair finally moved. Slowly, deliberately, she lifted her phone. The glow of assistant burned against her palm. For the first time, her thumb slid across the glass. She still did not speak. Her silence was louder than any argument, and the atmosphere bent around it. The officers froze. One barked into his radio, "She is making contact. Shut down all signals immediately." Panic cracked his tone, but the command arrived too late. Across the hall, screens lit up. Passengers gasped as their own phones displayed a new notification. Secure connection established. It appeared without permission, synced with Ava's device. People pulled their phones close, stunned. "Why is my screen doing that?" one woman cried. "What is she connected to?" another whispered. The intern's iPad shuddered in her hands. Lines of text flashed across it, syncing without her touch. She tried to shield the screen, but not before several passengers glimpsed a word that cut the air in half. Executive. Then the screen flickered and cleared, the word vanishing like smoke. The TSA supervisor lunged toward Ava, hand outstretched to seize the phone. But the crowd shifted instinctively, bodies forming a barrier between her and the officers. Voices rose. "Do not touch her. We are recording everything." In that instant, the officers no longer commanded the crowd. The crowd commanded them. The older man raised his voice again, his words iron sharp. "She has not said a word, and already you fear her. Why?" Dozens of cameras caught his face, his voice echoing across live streams. He offered no answers, but the question itself deepened the mystery. The officer gripping the bag of white powder wavered, his hand lowering. For the first time, doubt cracked his defiance. He looked at Ava as if waiting for her to shatter him completely. Then the radios erupted again, sharper and more frantic. "Command requires confirmation. Has she activated protocol?" The word thundered across the hall. Protocol. Phones captured it instantly. Social feeds erupted. "What protocol? Why does she have one? She is not just a passenger." The supervisor's jaw clenched, but his eyes flickered with unease. He turned his back for a moment, whispering into the radio, but his movements were caught by a dozen cameras. No secrecy remained. Every slip became part of the story. Ava lowered her phone, the screen now dark. One action was all it had taken. The ground beneath the entire terminal shifted. People whispered as if she had pressed a hidden switch. Officers faltered. The crowd surged forward, not with violence but with the relentless force of doubt. Ava finally lifted her gaze. She looked directly at the officer still clutching the evidence bag. Her eyes were steady, piercing. He could not hold her stare. His grip loosened, the bag lowering toward the counter. His authority was unraveling thread by thread. But Ava still said nothing. She let the silence hang heavy, pressing into every corner of the terminal. It was not weakness. It was control. The air inside the terminal had grown thick, heavy, charged with a tension that could not be dismissed. Every eye was fixed on Ava Sinclair. She had not spoken a single word, yet her presence had altered the balance of the room. The officers shifted uneasily, the crowd pressed closer, and the silence carried more weight than 1,000 shouts. The officer with the powder bag tried to recover, his voice cracked but strained for authority. "This is narcotics. That is undeniable." He lifted the bag again, his hand trembling slightly. But passengers no longer stared at the plastic. They stared at Ava, and then at the screens replaying the incriminating clip. The evidence and the authority behind it had been fractured. The intern, still clutching her iPad, took another step forward. Her voice was stronger now. "Her name is not just clearance. It is tied to something else." She stopped herself abruptly, as if she had already said too much. The cameras caught every flicker of fear on her face, and that hesitation spoke louder than a full confession. Radios hissed again, breaking through the tension. "Command requests confirmation of status. Has the protocol been breached?" The officer nearest the speaker paled. His eyes darted toward Ava, then back to the floor. He whispered into the receiver, but every microphone nearby caught his words. "We cannot confirm. She has not spoken." The crowd reacted instantly. Why would her voice matter? What happens if she speaks? The questions spread like sparks, feeding the fire of suspense. For the first time, Ava raised her chin slightly. She scanned the hall, her eyes moving across strangers who had become witnesses, allies, recorders of history. Then her gaze fell upon the officer with the bag of powder. She extended her hand slowly, palm open, not demanding but inviting. "Place it here," her gesture said without a single word. The officer's grip faltered. His knuckles whitened as he tried to hold firm, but the pressure of hundreds of lenses, the weight of his own doubt, and Ava's unyielding calm pushed against him. He lowered the bag an inch, then another. He did not surrender it completely, but the movement was enough to spark murmurs across the hall. The older man shouted again. "You see? Even he doubts it." His voice was caught by dozens of streams. The chant began anew. "Give it up! Give it up!" The supervisor snapped, slamming his hand on the counter. "Silence! This is federal jurisdiction!" But his shout was drowned by the sound of notifications. Phones buzzed across the hall as the viral clip spread beyond the terminal, reaching wider audiences. The story was no longer confined to O'Hare. Ava lowered her hand and returned to stillness. She had not spoken, but her control deepened with every silent act. The officers looked smaller now, diminished in the glow of a truth they could not contain. The silence could not last forever. For minutes, Ava Sinclair had commanded the entire terminal with nothing but stillness. Her eyes, her composure, her restraint had been louder than any words. But the moment finally arrived when silence alone was no longer enough. She raised her head fully and spoke. Her voice was calm even, and deliberate. It carried not as a shout, but as a current of authority, flowing through the crowd. "You may hold the evidence high. You may shout the word narcotics. But you and I both know this is not about a bag of powder." The sound rippled through the terminal. Conversations stopped. Even the chants quieted. The officers froze, their radios hissing unanswered. For the first time, Ava's voice was in the air, and it reshaped everything. The officer with the bag hesitated. His hand shook openly now, the bag trembling like a confession in plastic form. Ava's gaze stayed locked on him. "If you are so certain, place it in my hand. Let the world see if your courage matches your accusation." He faltered, lowering the bag inch by inch. The crowd roared with chants again. "Give it up! Give it up!" The sound grew into a wave that pressed against the officers. The balance of power had shifted. The intern stepped forward, emboldened by Ava's voice. She lifted the iPad higher, her voice unsteady but resolute. "Her name is tied to federal clearance. I saw it. It was marked executive level. She is not on any passenger manifest." Gasps burst across the crowd. Phones zoomed in on her screen, though the words flickered and vanished again. Still, the phrase had been spoken aloud, and once spoken, it could not be pulled back. The supervisor turned on the intern, his voice sharp with fury. "Do not speak another word." But cameras caught him lunging forward, and the optics only worsened his cause. Radios crackled in panic. "Command requires full confirmation. Has the protocol been triggered?" Another voice, faint but audible, answered, "Negative. She has spoken, but no trigger detected." The phrase set off confusion like sparks in gasoline. What trigger? Why did her words matter? What kind of protocol could be waiting behind her voice? Live streams exploded with speculation. Is she military? Is she intelligence? Why would her speech matter to command? Ava lowered her gaze briefly, then looked directly at the crowd. You are being asked to believe a story without substance. But truth, like fire, cannot be contained forever. She did not explain further. She did not reveal her identity. She left her words hanging, fragments sharp enough to pierce but incomplete enough to demand more. The older man shouted again, rallying the crowd. She is right. They cannot silence us all. Phones lifted higher. The hall was alive with tension, a living archive recording every second. The officer with the bag dropped it onto the counter, his authority fully broken. The powder sat there, untouched, its meaning eroded. The powder bag sat on the counter, abandoned, its meaning dissolved in doubt. No one looked at it anymore. Every eye, every camera, every whisper was drawn to Ava Sinclair. Her words from Part 8 still echoed, sharp and deliberate. This is not about a bag of powder. Radios crackled again, louder, angrier. Confirm her status. Command demands identification under the executive protocol. The word landed like a hammer. Executive protocol. It was the first time the phrase had been spoken in full. Phones captured it instantly, and the internet outside the terminal erupted in speculation. Passengers whispered among themselves, "What is the executive protocol? Why is command so afraid of her voice?" Some leaned closer to their screens, streaming feeds of analysts already debating the meaning in real time. The story was no longer confined to a single gate. It was national. The intern held her iPad close, trembling but refusing to hide it anymore. She spoke louder this time, voice echoing, "Her file is not civilian. It is federal. Executive status confirmed." She flipped the screen for a moment. The word executive burned in bright letters before the supervisor lunged and shoved the iPad down. But the damage was done. Phones had captured the single frame. It was already out. The officer who had once held the bag of powder muttered under his breath, "This was never about contraband." His words were caught on microphones nearby. The sentence spread instantly, his accidental confession another nail in the coffin of credibility. Ava finally moved again. She placed her hand flat on the counter, directly beside the powder bag. Calm, deliberate, she spoke. "If you insist on calling this evidence, then prove it. Test it now, here, in front of every witness." Her tone was unshaken, her command undeniable. The supervisor stiffened. "That is not procedure." Ava's eyes pierced him. "Your procedure was broken the moment you staged this. The world is watching. Test it." The chant rose again, more forceful, almost thunderous. "Test it, test it." The crowd was no longer passive. It demanded accountability. The officers hesitated, their authority cracking under the weight of cameras and chants. The supervisor barked into his radio, "We need reinforcements." Immediate. But the reply that came back was not comforting. A voice hissed, "Hold position. Do not escalate. Higher clearance is inbound." The phrase, "higher clearance," sent a ripple through the crowd. If local officers were losing control, who was coming next? Ava turned her gaze toward the passengers. "You see now. The louder the truth grows, the more desperate their silence becomes." Her words fed the fire. People cheered. Phones streamed every syllable. The older man raised his fist. "She is not alone. We are with her." The chant changed shape, no longer just about testing the evidence. It became a declaration. "We are with her. We are with her." The supervisor's face flushed. He slammed the counter again. "Stand down. This is a federal order." But even his own officers shifted uncomfortably, glancing between Ava, the cameras, and the chanting crowd. His grip on authority was slipping away, second by second. The terminal vibrated with chants, phones, and restless energy. The word executive protocol had already escaped into the public sphere, carried by countless live streams. Every second it spread further, making the containment of truth impossible. Then, a new sound cut through the chaos. The heavy rhythm of boots striking polished floor. A line of figures in dark uniforms advanced through the crowd. Their insignias were not TSA. Their badges were not visible to the public eye. Passengers stepped back instinctively, creating a corridor as the newcomers marched forward. The supervisor straightened, relief flickering across his face. "Higher clearance has arrived," he announced, as if their presence alone could restore order. But the crowd did not cheer. Instead, suspicion deepened. If local authority had failed, what kind of power did this group carry? One of the newcomers, a tall woman with a steady gaze, stepped ahead. She spoke with calm authority. "Stand down. This matter is now under federal directive." Her voice carried weight, but it did not silence the room. Cameras stayed high. Live streams rolled on. Every word was recorded. Ava did not move at first. She watched the group approach, her eyes narrowing slightly. Then, with deliberate grace, she raised her phone again. The glow of assistant returned, brighter this time. Passengers gasped as more of their devices flickered in sync. Notifications blinked across unrelated phones. Network secured. Executive channel active. The federal woman's composure cracked for the briefest moment. Her eyes darted to the supervisor, then back to Ava. "Deactivate that connection immediately," she ordered. Her tone carried urgency that betrayed fear. Ava finally spoke again, her words steady and unshaken. "You arrive cloaked in authority, but authority without truth is brittle. Do you wish to silence me? Or do you wish to reveal why your command fears a single word from my lips?" The hall erupted in murmurs. Questions rippled outward. Why are they afraid of her voice? What happens if she speaks again? The mystery of protocol grew heavier. The intern, emboldened, lifted her iPad once more. She shouted above the noise, "The file says her clearance outranks theirs." Gasps burst like sparks. The crowd erupted in cheers and disbelief. Phones zoomed in, capturing her every word. The tall federal officer snapped at her men. "Secure the device." But when one of them stepped forward, the crowd closed ranks around the intern, shielding her. "No more silencing," a woman shouted. "We have seen enough lies." The officer with the powder bag lowered his head, defeated, his role reduced to silence. The chant returned, louder than ever. "Tell the truth. Tell the truth." Ava placed her phone flat on the counter, screen still glowing. Her hand hovered above it, poised. She looked directly at the tall federal officer. "You already know what happens if I press this again." Her calmness carried the weight of inevitability. The officer's jaw tightened, but she gave no command. For the first time, the authority in the room did not belong to uniforms. It belonged to silence, to truth, waiting to be spoken, and to the woman standing at the center of it all. The hall had shifted. The powder bag, the shouting, even the officers in dark uniforms, all of it felt smaller now, overshadowed by the calm figure of Ava Sinclair. She stood at the counter, her phone glowing like a silent engine, and the crowd's energy seemed to orbit around her. The tall federal officer tried again, her tone sharper. "This situation is classified. Everyone will stand down immediately." But the words no longer carried force. Cameras pointed at her from every direction, broadcasting her attempt to seize control. The crowd did not move back. Instead, they closed in tighter, shielding Ava and the intern, refusing to be silenced. Ava finally spoke again, her voice steady. "You do not fear drugs. You do not fear security breaches. You fear exposure." "Well." The intern lifted her iPad once more, trembling but resolute. She turned the screen outward, showing fragments of text that scrolled across the clearance file. Words flashed. "Federal contract. Aviation infrastructure. Executive oversight." Gasps rippled through the terminal. The supervisor lunged for the device, but a wall of passengers blocked him. A chant erupted, new and fierce. "Show the file! Show the file!" The chant was louder than any order, filling the cavernous terminal like thunder. Radios hissed again. "Command requires immediate suppression. Do not let her broadcast." The urgency betrayed fear. Suppression meant force. But the officers hesitated. Too many cameras, too many witnesses. One wrong move, and the entire spectacle would implode on them. The older man shouted above the noise, his voice breaking but strong. "This is no suspect. She is the one funding the very ground we stand on." His words were speculative, but they struck like lightning. Phones caught it, streams amplified it, and the crowd roared in disbelief and awe. Ava did not confirm. She did not deny. She simply turned her gaze toward the tall officer. Her silence weighed more than any admission. The tall officer's composure finally cracked. She leaned into her radio, whispering urgently, unaware that microphones around her were still live. "She outranks us. If she activates it, command loses control." The words spilled across live streams instantly. The reaction was electric. People shouted, "Outranks them? Outranks who?" Confusion swelled, but so did conviction. Whatever Ava was, she was no ordinary traveler. For the first time, Ava placed both hands on the counter. She leaned forward slightly, her voice calm but edged with steel. "You tried to bury me with a handful of powder. You forgot that roots run deeper than surface lies. Now the soil is breaking. Dig Anner." The crowd roared, echoing her metaphor, their chants a chorus of defiance. The officer who had once planted the evidence lowered his head completely, shame written across his features. His silence was confession enough. But before the crowd could fully rally, the federal officer barked a final command. "Lock down this gate. Nobody leaves." Barriers began to slide, metallic shutters grinding into place. Gasps turned into shouts. The people realized they were being trapped. Bun. The metallic shutters slammed down, echoing through the terminal. Gasps turned into shouts as passengers realized they were being trapped. Fear threatened to swallow the hall, but at the center, Ava Sinclair stood unmoved, her calmness a blade sharper than panic. She reached for her phone and pressed the screen. Assistant glowed brightly, brighter than before. The notification spread again, rippling across nearby devices. "Executive channel active." This time, a voice echoed from the phones themselves. "Authentication confirmed. Protocol green." The tall federal officer stiffened, her face drained of color. She whispered into her radio, forgetting again that cameras were everywhere. "She just authenticated. We cannot override." The crowd erupted. Questions collided in the air. Who is she? What does she control? The intern held up her iPad one final time, no longer trembling. The words were clear now. Sinclair Aviation, federal contractor, executive authority. Ava stepped forward, her voice calm but resonant. "You staged powder to break me. You locked gates to contain me. You whispered about protocol as if it were a weapon. But the truth is simple. I built this terminal. Sinclair Aviation funds your security systems, your infrastructure, your contracts. You tried to bury me under lies, but you forgot the soil is mine." The hall fell into stunned silence. Even the chants stopped. Every officer, every passenger, every camera stared at her. The officer who had planted the bag lowered his head completely, whispering, "It was all a setup." His voice cracked under the weight of truth. The crowd roared, fury and vindication mixing together. Ava raised her hand, palm open, steady. "The evidence is false. The file is true, and the world is watching." Her words were not loud, but they carried authority that drowned out every protest. The tall federal officer stepped back, defeated. Radios hissed, but no orders came. Command had gone silent. The shutters lifted. Passengers surged forward, not in chaos, but in triumph. Phones streamed live as Ava walked calmly through the opening. The chant rose again, louder than ever, but now it was unified. "We are with her. We are with her." Ava did not smile. She simply walked forward, her silence restored, her dignity intact. The world had just seen the truth.